To make these cool but simple leather bracelets that are really popular with men and generally a lot of different people, all you need are the tools here. And I'm going to go through them real quick, but it's a lot less than what it looks like. This is the simplest way. We're not getting into any kind of fancy leather tools. These are mostly things you already have or things you should already have if you're doing any kind of crafts. Heavy duty scissors. Go to Walmart, go to Amazon. Don't spend more than 15 bucks. They'll come in handy for a lot of stuff. You can use crap dollar store scissors just to get by if you need to, or anything you have laying around. But this is going to save your hands and make everything so much easier to cut. So this is, again, I'm going to asterisk all the ones that are optional. This is optional. You could literally use any scissors pretty much that still have some kind of cutting ability. But especially for heavy leather, you're going to want these. This you can use for so many different crafts. You should just own one anyway. And seriously, 10 bucks. You could spend 15 or 20, but I found it for 10 bucks. And with a coupon at Michael's, I think you can get it for like down to 7. Get that. Any hammer will do for this. We're doing very light tapping. You technically don't need the hammer. It's just, you could get any little piece of metal that's kind of flat and use it for, you'll see what we're going to use it for. Very light tapping, but you should have a hammer. This is the meat of what you want to get that you probably will not have if you haven't done leather work before. These are called grommets or eyelets. Put it both in the search if you're looking for them. But I prefer the antique brass or antique bronze color. This has a bunch of different colors in here. But you need 3 things here. You need, these are called button stud clasps. They're just 2 parts. One is a little knob. One is a back with a screw so they can screw together. That's it. Get them. You need that for the clasp. It's the simplest clasp you'll ever have, and it's the easiest way to make an adjustable clasp on a leather bracelet. Snaps are cooler, but snaps come in 2 parts, 4 parts, and you need extra pliers, you need extra tools. It can be a pain in the butt, lining them up right. This thing, you put one on, you put a whole bunch of holes on the other side, and it instantly, they also hold better. They don't pop off. If you're working with something and something bangs the leather bracelet, snaps will pop off all day long. This is literally the best thing. So just get it. It's the most inexpensive, trust me. That's number 1. Number 2, these grommets or eyelets, I've seen them written as both, but grommets can also be a 2-part thing. You don't want the 2-part. You want these simple, they literally look like this. That's it. They have little teeth on the end. They're a little cylinder that's kind of rolled over on top, and they have little teeth at the bottom, and you put them in the hole, and then you need this tool which punches it and makes this side fan out like that. So it holds onto the leather. It's just 1 part. That's all you need. So number 3 brings us to, you need the grommet tool. And this guy, seriously, I've seen it for 10 bucks by himself. This little tool, it's just pliers. All it does is just crimps these, so it does what I just said. But I found this at Harbor Freight. It was like $4 for the tool and all these grommets. So awesome. That's it. Then you just need leather. Go to your thrift store, get some scrap belts. Try to make sure it's real leather. There's kind of like fuzzy, hairy kind of stuff on the back usually if it's real leather. Also, it has like a stronger, tougher feel. Faux leather will work if you're vegan or if you can't find this, but it's not as strong as real leather. It's not as sturdy. It has a different feel to it. But you can get bags of scrap leather at Michael's, Joann Fabrics, probably other craft stores. You could probably order them online. I didn't even check. A bag of scrap leather, enough to make like 20 of these bracelets, is like 10 bucks or less. So if you really want to go to high end, you can go to Tandy Leather. They're like the official leather dealers in the US, and they're pricey, but they'll give you all the good stuff and then pay a couple dollars more. But those are some options. But get some leather. I mean, you can go to the thrift store and get a purse and cut it up if you can make sure it's real leather. The leather might be really thin. You want to get this thick stuff. This is the best. It's not as thick as belt. It's a little thinner, but it's heavy. And somebody sent me these scraps. This is great. Love it. All right, let's get started. For a simple one, we're just going to go make some rectangles, pretty much. Make about 3/4 of an inch to an inch wide. because that's the size that people like. I say, because I decided that people like that because I like it. So see, I'm not measuring. I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm just making some cuts. So if you want, you could do the whole thing in just one piece like this. Now see, that was a little hard on my hands, and these are the heavy duty scissors. If I were to use these dollar store scissors, it would hurt. But if you're just making one bracelet, it'll do the job. So basically test it on your wrist, test it on a friend, or you can try to look up what size wrist is average and whatever, but then you have to also calculate for the width and the thickness and all that junk. So just try it out on a few people until you get a sense. That's why it's good to make it adjustable. But see, this is a good size right here. You have about 1 inch of overlap to put your clasp, and it's snug where it's not going to be like bouncing around like a bangle, but it can breathe a little bit. So tight leather, really tight on your wrist, is going to make you sweaty and uncomfortable. So this is good. And the simplest one would just be round off the corners. Don't even try to, it's rustic. Don't try to make it amazing. If you want, you can take your time and try to make like amazing corners, but seriously, it's not, at the end of the day, nobody's going to be looking at this part. And if you want to make it really uneven, sometimes I'll just, make random weird cuts in there, make it look more funky. But this is the most simple one right here. Just like this. See, I said don't be perfect, and now I'm rounding it off even more, but there we go. And get your hole punch. Test it out. You have all these different sizes. Always start at the smallest to test it out, because you can always go bigger. But once you go too big, you can't go backwards. So I'm pretty sure I want the second from the smallest. And how do you want it to overlap? Does it matter? It usually doesn't matter. But in this case, I want the smaller end on the bottom, and that's where I'm going to put the knob. So here goes right about. Always make sure you have a cut all the way through with the punch. Give it a little wiggle sometimes, and then make sure it has that little piece of leather that comes out. Sometimes the leather gets stuck in there, and you can just wiggle it. But so pop these guys open. 2-part. Got the knob and the screw. Let's pop this guy in. And, ooh, it's a tight fit. It works. You don't need a super tight fit for this, but I could have done the third hole from the smallest. It would have worked too. All right, put this guy on. Super easy. Make sure the threading is in and start just screwing it on. Come on, baby. Get in there. Now, you can put a screwdriver on this side. If you don't have a screwdriver, you can take your scissors. It's probably not good for your scissors, but when do we ever do anything the right way? And just hold it like that. This one, for some reason, is not cooperating. Let's try another one. Okay, the back part on that one, there's something wrong with it. Go figure. The first one I pick is defective. So then you're just going to be, just twist it on until you can't twist it anymore. And then you want to get it really tight. You can put a couple drops of super glue. Ooh, forgot to mention that. This is an optional one, but super glue gel, dollar store, you get 2 of them. Or wherever else you want to get them. But get the green top. It's a gel. You get the red top. It's going to be clear liquid. You're going to get it all over the place. It'll be a mess. It still works, but the gel, much easier to control. And this stuff is better for leather, I found, than even special expensive glue made for leather. And go figure, because super glue was originally made to bind wounds together. So it's made to literally hold skin to skin. And that's why you'll glue your hands together if you're not careful. But it's also safe for your skin. It's not nice to get on your skin, because it'll take like a day to get it off. You have to sit there scratching with your fingernail. You can use nail polish remover, but it doesn't always work that well. And I generally find it takes like a whole day and showering and washing my hands several times and sitting there picking at it with my fingernail, and it finally comes off. So I try not to get on my fingers. But if I do, I generally only try to cry for half an hour. Keep your crying to half an hour. So put a drop in there if you want, but you don't have to. What you do want to do is get it very tight. So get your screwdriver, which you should have, or just be lazy like me. Put your scissors in there. Try not to cut your hand off. And get it extra tight. Extra tight. Once you have it extra tight, then watch how easy this is. Now, the biggest hole punch on here, for some reason, is still not big enough to match this little knob. You'd think it would be, but it isn't. So what you got to do, I make 3 little holes in a cluster, a little bit overlapping. Kind of like I'll make a hole, and then I'll make another hole right there, and then I'll make another hole right there. Can you see that? Hole, hole, and a hole, kind of overlapping like that. So here goes. And this is the biggest hole here. hole. Again, squeeze tight, 2 hands. You don't want to hurt your wrist on this. Give it a wiggle, pop it out. There's 1 hole, and test it, because sometimes I could be wrong depending on the one you get. But see, that's not going in, no matter how much push I give it. So now I'm going to give it a little bit more right there on the edge. Squeeze, wiggle, and then 1 more. Try to give it like a little cluster of like 3, and pop it out. And now give it a shot. Perfect. It pops in and doesn't come off immediately, but when you give it a little push, pops right off. Now you may say, oh, that's not tight enough of a fit. But when it's on your wrist, all the pressure is pulling it like this or like this. So it's not coming off. There's usually not going to be pressure pulling that. That's the key. So check this out. It's on my wrist. Pops on easier than anything. And that's going to stay. Look, beating it up. I'm abusing it. It's not coming off. But as soon as you just give it a little tug, poof. And then the best part about this is you make it extra long and you give yourself like 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. Go crazy with the holes. And then it can adjust to any wrist. It can go from everything from a little 7-year-old all the way up to a big grizzly biker man who has like 10-inch wrists, you know? And big grizzly biker men, what they love for their birthday more than anything is a leather bracelet that you made. I'm telling you, I've talked to a bunch of them. So this is the easiest one, but let's have more fun with this. I'm going to cut this one a little wider, like pretty much a full inch. But again, I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And, you know, however it comes out, that's just what it's going to be. Now I'm just cutting like 2-inch pieces. That's it. It's kind of thin at the end, but whatever, maybe we'll use that for something. So I'm going to make a bunch of these, and I'm going to alternate the colors. Black and brown, pretty much man's best friend. Men like black and brown. They're simple, it's boring, it's subtle, it's earth tone, goes with everything. Different leather cuts differently. This is actually, it's just as thick, but it's much smoother than the brown. It's actually a little thicker. And it's got this cool pattern. Leather is just so much fun. Like, really enjoy your materials. When you really enjoy your materials, it's like swimming. Just feel the water around you. Feel the goodness of what you're working with. Now, you don't have to. You can make it as rugged as you want, but I like to cut these corners off because I just feel like otherwise they just get caught on stuff and I don't know. As long as you cut them off rough, it'll still be manly. You don't want to make them too smooth, but it just looks a little better, I find. Now arrange them the way you want. I generally like the overlap to stay the same, but it doesn't have to. You can go like this. There's no right or wrong. You can cut these diagonal. You can cut them every which way. Doesn't matter. For the grommets to work the way I'm going to show you, you need an overlap of at least 1/2 inch or at least 1.5 centimeters. I'd say more 3/4 of an inch, but somewhere in that neighborhood. You'll start to get a feel for it after you do a few. You might mess a few up. Who cares? You're learning. Now what you want to do, you can take this super glue, you can put a little bit on and glue them together. I'll show you. You just need like a little bit. Just to make it look kind of wet. And put the cap on right away because that stuff will just keep squirting out. And overlap it, press it. There's no reason to get it on your fingers. If you do, don't feel bad, but like you really don't need to. Press it and then put it down. It might pop up, so don't worry about it. But basically get all your pieces glued. And this, you don't need to worry. The glue is not what's going to hold it ultimately. The glue is just going to hold it in place till you get the grommets. And you don't need the glue. You can sit there and just you can skip to the grommet part if you want. But I'm just showing you this can make it easier, especially if you're doing weird shapes and you want them held in a very specific way. Like, just give it a little bit of pressure for a couple seconds, move to the next one. Super easy. And if you're not sure whether to make it too big or too small, always make it too big. You can always cut it down. If you make it too small, well, technically you can always add another piece, right? So just do whatever you feel like it. I don't care. I don't care what you do. I really don't care. You think I care? Ask me if I care. Do I care? I don't care. That's even too much. You don't even need that much. Boom. Now, put a book on top of this and let it sit for half an hour. It's going to be a lot. I mean, this stuff dries relatively quick, but you don't want to be messing with it and all of a sudden it just, what you're holding just falls off, because the whole point of the glue is so that doesn't happen. So give it a good half hour under a book. Or a bin full of paint, or just something heavy and flat. Okay, once your glue has dried, you're ready for the grommet part. Again, you can just hold 2 pieces together at a time. You don't need the glue if you want to wing it, but the glue can make it easier. Get to your largest setting usually. Test it for your grommets or eyelets, but I usually find the largest setting is what works. And you can sometimes better to write out exactly where you're going to put it, kind of space them evenly. If it's thinner than this, I'll just put 1. But for this, I'll put, it's a little wide. 2 kind of feels better. Or you can do it on the back if you want to be safe. But kind of look at it sideways and make sure it's going to go straight through, you know, the right where you want to put it. Again, check it like this. Make sure you're good all around. And squeeze hard, because you got to get through both layers. Then give it a wiggle. And then pull it out. Boom. Make sure everything's good. Check the hole on that side. Make sure you didn't go over the edge. And do your second one. Now, unless you sit there with a ruler and try to do everything perfect, these are probably not going to line up perfectly your first few times. You'll get better and better at eyeballing it, but look at that. Not perfect, but it doesn't matter. It'll work. I'll just pop them in. Now, you're going to find different sizes work better for different ones. These are a little small. They're just barely making it. And I think these, I don't know the millimeters on these, but get some assorted ones and try to feel, I can't tell you which ones will work for the leather you get, but this looks like, I'm going to guess this is like about 6 millimeters. And I don't know if they measure from the inner part of the hole or the outer part of the circle. It's about 6 going inside, 8 millimeters going outside. Coming down, I'd say this is about 5 or 6 millimeters. So see how you want the teeth to stick out a little bit. See how the teeth are not sticking out at all? You can kind of wing it and get away with this, but luckily, and these are also the same size as the ones that came with the grommet maker. So I have some pretty thick leather, and I'm trying to go through 2 layers. So luckily I have these bigger ones, and this is only like a couple millimeters bigger, but it makes a huge difference. If you find your bigger grommets don't fit your biggest hole, do that trick again where you just kind of make 2 or 3 holes really close together to try to widen it. So that's 2 right there, and boom. Oh, by the way, that popped off. I didn't wait the full half hour for the glue to dry. I tried to rush it in about 10 minutes. That's what I get. But anyway. And that's what happens when you don't punch all the way through on the first one. So boom, that's what you want. You just need a tiny bit of the teeth popping out the other side. When I say teeth, it's just kind of the end of the cylinder, but it's cut into little sections. So then you get your tool, take the safety off, and obviously this part goes on the round side, and you just put it together like this, and then hold it 2 hands real tight. Make sure everything's lined up if your glue is failing you, and give it a good squeeze. And you should hear a little pop as the teeth spread out. And they started to on this one, but it's going to finish up. I'll show you once we take the hammer to it. So let's get the rest of these on. Now, sometimes it's subtle, but see the difference between one of the grommets whose teeth were spread out by the tool and one whose wasn't? If they're not spread out a little bit, the next part is not going to do anything, and they're going to fall out eventually. So you need to get them the spread started. It doesn't have to be great, but that's why you need that tool. The only other thing you could possibly do is put some kind of rounded metal piece in there and hammer it to try to spread them out if you didn't have the tool. It's possible, but tool is just so much easier. But again, this tool wasn't made for this exact size, so I got to squeeze extra hard, which is fine, because I'm like the strongest person who ever makes leather belts and bracelets. But I can feel when it finally gives. It's a great feeling. Okay, the next part is crucial. See how the teeth are kind of spread out, but not that much. First of all, they're a little scratchy, and that part is going to be against the wrist, so that's no bueno. And secondly, you want them spread out more so they really grab the leather permanently. So this is real easy. Couple taps of a hammer. You want to put it on a hard surface. Don't put it on like a flimsy table, but a really hard work table or a good hard floor, and don't put it somewhere where you could hurt the floor, but really the leather is going to absorb most of it. It's just, you're not going to have to hit it hard. This is real easy. So let's put it on the floor. Give it a couple taps. Seriously, light. Let the weight kind of pound in, but you don't have to really kill it. And you'll start to see the difference. The teeth will really spread out. Now, if you only have one layer of leather, or like our earlier piece here, or very thin leather, and you can use the smaller ones, you can use them just for decoration. So I'm going to show you how this very bland piece of leather, which could be fine, that could be all a guy or a girl wants, is just a simple piece of leather. I've had people ask for something like this many times, but spice it up a little bit. Take your, and we're going to use the small ones this time, so we still need the largest hole punch, but we don't need to do it like 3 times. And just kind of space them out, maybe every 2 inches. And these are the size the tool was made for, so there's like a nice little give you feel, where they just pop in and they spread out. See, that's the look you want. See those teeth? But still, we're going to hit it with the hammer a little bit because it is a little scratchy, and they'll spread out even more. See that? And now you feel it. No scratch. It's kind of blended. It kind of gets indented into the leather. Nothing. Seriously, nothing. It's that easy. Now sometimes if you hit them too hard, you kind of flatten the other side and it looks kind of deformed. And that's, see, that one wasn't hit as hard. That one was hit extra hard. And that's okay because it just makes it look extra cool. So, see how awesome that looks? It's amazing. I can add the other colors in, the antique copper and the silver, and you know, you can zigzag them around, put them all over, this, whatever you want to do. Back to this guy. You can just give little angular cuts there if you want to be extra rustic, or you can round it, whatever you want to do. And then continuing with the pattern, how it is, see how this overlaps this one, overlap, 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 so this one would technically overlap that one to finish it off, and therefore this one would receive the knob. And it doesn't matter, but little things like that make it cool. Little hole for the knob. On this side, we're going to make 2 holes. You can even make 3 holes to make this adjustable to many different wrists. So we're going to go to our biggest hole. And again, we're going to go make a little cluster of 3. Sometimes if you don't get all the leather out, you can punch it again and wiggle it more, or you can just be lazy like me and get your pliers in there and just be like, get out. Get out of there. No, I'm going to put the knob on. Bam. It's perfection. And I can make it tighter if I had a skinny wrist like a weak, tiny person. All right. Or you could go really weird, or even weirder. Now I'm finding this tool doesn't even work on the grommets it came with that great, so I'm having to like hit it with the hammer on a stable surface to really get it to cause that grommet piece to fan out the right way. But eventually it works.